and it let out this blood-curdling, guttural scream.
On the side of the road, he sees a deer carcass and something eating on it, which he thought was a bear. And as the lights hit it, it stood up. And, like, this gives me chills talking about it. He said it stood up and it had the face of a man.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bigfoots of America podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Sawyer. We're going to jump right into it. This is episode 13, and our eyewitness is Donna Copas, and she's from Blue Creek, Ohio. And Donna has had numerous sightings and encounters with what she calls the Watchers since about the age of 6. So with all that said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to invite Donna into stage and we're going to get to it. Hey, Donna, you there?
I'm here. How you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Good to see you. This is wonderful. We've been playing back and forth on Messenger, talking here and there for the last couple of months. And just everything you've said has really intrigued me to get to know you better. Most sightings out there, from what I understand, are usually only about anywhere between 1 second and 5 seconds long. But you have had a history with what you don't call them Bigfoot, you don't call them Sasquatch, you call them the Watchers. And just looking at my notes here, you're also of Shawnee Indian descendant. And I think that plays into it a lot. I have a Cherokee Indian background on my mother's side. I've got an old picture of me sitting with my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, who were both 50% Cherokee Indian, and then my great-great-grandmother, who was just an outright full-blooded squaw. So I can definitely relate to you with all of that. So, hey, let's jump right into it, and you can start from the beginning, what it was like growing up, and just how all your interactions start.
Okay. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And my dad was born back in a cabin under Buzzard Roost. It's a place here in 1927, and that's where he grew up at. Then he had interactions there all his life from the time he was a child. And when I was 6 years old, my dad hunted, trapped, he dug roots, everything. That was part of our living. He farmed, and then he would work other jobs, But on this day, there was a county fair in town, and I wanted to go to the fair. Well, my dad almost said you had to work. If you wanted to do something, wasn't given to you, you worked for it. So he took me out. There's a big yellow root patch here. People call it golden seal. We call it yellow root. And we sitting there, and we'd been digging the roots. Dad doing most of the digging. I was cleaning it. You have to break the tops off, and you put the roots in one bag. Tops goes in the other because you sell them both. You make medicine with it, and we even keep it. That's what it's good for. And we'd been there for a while, and we had quite a bit dug. And all of a sudden, Dad stood up. Of course, he wore bib overalls, and he walked over. There's a big stump there where a tree had come down. That cut it. There's a big old round stump there. And he walked over, and Dad chewed tobacco, and he'd either carry long green from the barn, or he'd have those plugs of tobacco. And he took the plug of tobacco out, and he laid it on that stump there. And he said, no, he didn't call me Donna. He usually called me Donnie, or he called me Dookie.
That's cute.
He was like, come on, Duke, we're going to go. And, of course, I'm grumbling, and, I'm mad. I don't want to leave because I want my money for the fair. That's my big thing. And they said, no, come on now. I said, we're going. And I knew when that tone of voice hit, that was time for me to go. So I got up, and I'm digging my toe in the dirt. You know how a kid is. I don't want to go. And he got me by the hand. He's like, come on now. So I started walking away. And as I walked away, I just turned around. I looked over. And where that tobacco was on that stump, this huge black figure stood up. It was 8 foot tall. To me, it looked like a mountain. And of course, being a kid, I scared me. And I got Dad by the hand. He just kind of shook my hand. He's like, come on now, just calm down. It won't bother you. You leave it alone. It'll leave you alone. Come on now.
Wow.
So we walked. I walked and I looked, and it took that tobacco, and it turned around and went back up. Where we was at, there's cliffs and woods, and it went back up through the woods towards them cliffs. And that was the first time I saw one. And of course, Dad's telling me, part of his teaching, he's like, they're just here to watch us. They're here to protect us. You just
Wow.
you don't do nothing bad to them. They won't do nothing bad to you. So that's how I grew up. Over my lifetime, I saw them numerous times. I was always in the woods. I was a terrible child. I was a wild child. Farm was like a 300-acre farm. I had horses and cows and everything you imagine. We had 11-acre berry patch, 11 acres.
Okay.
It was, tree and all that. So from the time I was little, I hated school. I did. I promised my dad, I said, if you buy me a pony, I'll go to school. Well, he bought the pony, and about 3 days after he bought it, I went 3 days to school, and then I ran off on the pony into the woods. But I grew up, there was a creek there, and the most memorable one, I would see shadows and shapes. I'd see them off and on. But I was about 12 years old, and I had real long hair. My hair hung down below my waist. And there's a creek there, and I love to go down that creek. I go down and read a book. There's a little waterfalls like, and then you know how the blue clay in the bottom, the small creeks, it was just smooth where it run down, smooth out. And my grandma, God rest her soul, I feel terrible for being as wild as I was. But she would break my hair. She would take these real colorful strings. She just tear strips of cloth, and she'd braid my hair so tight that the back of the skin on the back of your neck stand up. And of course, as I got away, I take it down. Well, I went to the creek that day, and I had my book, and I laid down there in the water, and it'd run. I just lay in the water. And I took my hair down though, and I laid them ribbons up on the rock there beside of me. And I just, I got a whiff, because they got that pungent odor. But I didn't see nothing. And then I kind of fell asleep, it was hot. It was summertime.
Okay.
And I kind of woke up, and my ribbons was gone, and by those strings. And I knew I was going to get in trouble with my grandma because, I shouldn't have took my hair down to begin with. And, so, and I looked all around. I was like, what in the world would have took them, because coons and stuff, they're bad to do stuff. And all of a sudden I looked up in the woods. There's cedar trees. There's a big cedar grove. And I seen a dark shape moving, and I seen them strings moving, along. And I'm like, oh my, I was used to seeing them, but it was also, Dad's, it's like, don't ever be stupid because, they won't bother you, but you got to be cautious. You use your brain, don't. So I'm here. I'm down in the woods. I had my pony. I had a big pony, a bigger pony then, and I'd loosen his saddle and I just ground time and let him eat, while I was playing around. And he wasn't liking it. He was wanting. He was pulling, and he was wanting out there too. So I had to tighten the saddle up before I could, get up out there. Usually I just ride bareback. I wouldn't even put it on, but I put it on that day. And so I got on up out of there and got home. I had to go quite a ways to get back to the house because I had to go. Well, it's 300-acre farm and there's a lot of room. So, but the next day, nothing kept me out of the woods. So that was just my life. It's summertime, school was out, and that was, I just played in the woods. And So I went back the next day, back to my swimming hole, and there laying on that rock where my ribbons and stuff had been, there was an
Wow.
straightener, the stone, and which I've got a lot of them. But there was some other little pieces of crystal and some colorful stones. And that was all laying there where he'd taken I don't know if it's he or she, but where they'd taken my ribbons, that was laying there.
Wow.
So
So kind of gifted you back in a sense. It was like, hey, I took these ribbons, so I'm going to give you something back.
I would, from then on, I would sense, I'd go and they never stepped out and shook my hand or anything like that. And that's what Dad said. He's like, you don't never get close. You let them, let them kind of be what they want to be because they're just, watching. And,
Okay.
through my lifetime, like I said, I was kind of a wild child. I rode bulls. The boys
Oh,
probably.
wow.
I did. We had the cattle. We bring them in for castration, and the boys rode bulls, so they did it. I did. And,
Awesome.
all that. So I grew up. The woods was my home. I dug roots by myself. I hunted.
Okay.
I used to gun just like and I still do. I hunted this year. I hadn't hunted for a long time, but this year we'd had some. I do a lot of work with the veterans here now, and I do.
Oh, nice.
And then we had a storm here, and it took out the electric. So some of the elders had lost meat, in the freezers and stuff. So I decided I'd hunt, and then when I hunt, I always gift back. I take a portion of that back in. I get different areas here in the county that I go to, and I took some of that back in there and left it. And then I make apple. It's an old homemade apple stack cakes. I make them out. I cook the apples, and then I make the homemade cake, and then I use applesauce, and I use those for gifting too.
Nice,
So
nice. Your two sightings when you were younger, is that in the area where you live now? I think you've always lived there, right?
I've lived 3 places in my whole lifetime. The big farm I grew up on is probably about where I live right now. It's probably maybe 8 miles from where I am now. So all these woods connect. And then I was actually born where Dad was born at was Buzzard Roost, and where I was born at there's Buzzard Roost Red Rock. There's the old house that's set there where I was born at home. So that's where I was born at. So same vicinity. And so I moved from my childhood home where I grew up, the big farm where I grew up. And then when I met my husband and got married, I moved back down to the same area where I was born at. And even there, the Nature Conservancy owns all that now, which they're really great. They let me have access to come in because our family burials are there. And Dad kept them, and we did all of our the ceremonial type thing. I still do that to honor my ancestors.
Very nice.
There's just some really wonderful spots there, kind of magical sometimes. And so they've been really great about letting me come back in. Mr. McAllister, I'd met with him, and Dad, when I got married, Dad also moved from off of the big farm, and he was only about 1.5 miles down the road from me, and he went back on to the farm that I lived on. It was where my kids grew up. It was probably about 200 acres. And then Dad was down the road, and his was probably about 3. So that's a big, and we kind of interact back and forth through there. So in that area.
I was down at the Serpent Mound. How far is that from you? The southeastern portion of the state, I think it is.
Probably the Serpent Mound is probably maybe 20 miles from me. It's not real
Okay.
far. If we take the back roads, that's usually how
Okay.
I travel the back way. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
one thing I noticed about that area, here in Michigan, at least where I'm at, we're pretty flat. But
mhm,
whenever you encounter Sasquatch here or you get into their areas, the hills do start to roll a little bit, and then you'll find the more major rivers are close by. And when I was down there in Ohio, that's what I noticed. It wasn't, outright. The foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, right? They kind of lead into the Appalachian Mountains where you're at, and yeah, it seems to be that's where they prefer that middle ground. Not, I mean, they might be up in the mountains. I'm learning more, but they don't mind coming down. Like here, they'll come out into the farmland and grab themselves some deers and then
right.
head back into their territory. Um, yeah, so let's expand on that a little bit, because there's a couple of things. I think you're one of the people I can talk to about like personality types and what you think these. I don't even want to, sometimes I don't like to call them creatures because that alludes to an animal. I like to call them beings because I feel like they're more human like. What are
Right.
your thoughts on that?
Well, my interactions, like I said, and dealing with, I'll talk about what happened with Dad when he was older, but
Hmm.
um, they're more, not that they don't have, there's good, there's bad in everybody, just like human beings. Um, I've never experienced a lot of violence. I've had a couple encounters where they were more agitated and violent. Um, Mostly, they watch. Um, they interact in different ways. They do have what I think is human characteristics. I can't speak.
Oh, that's
um,
okay.
Trying to get it out there. Anyway, but they're also have that unpredictable. They're unpredictable. You don't really
Okay.
set them off. I actually last summer I had an interaction that wasn't great. We have a Bigfoot group that comes here, the Night Stalkers, and I go out with them. I do some like guide type things, and then we're
Okay.
just so, and they're really great. They're really great. Well, on this particular night, we had been out, and they came back in. They do like the wolf calls, the coyote calls, that kind of thing. Now, I never do that. What I do is I play flute music, I play drumming, more peaceful, calm type thing. But on this night, Mike Miller had texted me, and he's like, "Would you mind walking out?" Because they was up above me, and they were doing some calls. He said, "Would you mind coming out into like your backyard to see if you could hear our calls?" So I came in. I had a skirt on. I did change my dress shoes to tennis shoes. And normally I'll pick up a gun to carry with me. And that night I didn't. I just had my phone. And I walked back. I have a greenhouse that sits up against my woods. And my house is spring fed. So I have big springs. I don't have county water. I have big
Oh,
springs. And I have a creek that runs past my house. It has fish and turtles and, that kind of thing.
wow.
Yeah. When I got out and once I get back to the barn, after I pass the barn, I'm in just darkness. And I heard the screaming coming through the woods. And first I thought, well, maybe that's them doing their calls. Maybe I'm hearing their calls. And then it got more closer and more agitated, should I say.
Okay.
Well, I get to the greenhouse, and like I said, I'm in pitch black. I just got my phone, and all of a sudden, I hear trees snapping. I hear, I actually have the recording. I didn't send it to you, but I have it on a recorder.
Oh,
My
great.
recorder,
No.
they're not cleaned up or anything. These are just, I actually go back to where I had recordings on old cassette tapes. It's the old time. But
Wow.
this night, they're snapping and growling and screaming and like fighting, like they're fighting. And of course, I'm here, and then I'm thinking, you dummy, I don't have a gun. But your gun wouldn't have did me no good anyway. I do. If I'm going to go and I'm concerned about something, I have a British Enfield 303 with armor-piercing bullets.
Oh
Now,
my.
I never shoot nothing. I would never shoot one of them or harm them unless it was a life-threatening situation where, but it has knockdown power. I can blow up an engine block with that. Not to be truthful. But
Wow.
that night I had nothing but a skirt, tennis shoes, and a phone. All of a sudden, though, where we've been working at the greenhouse, I had like plastic buckets sitting there. I had an igloo cooler, one of those red igloo coolers, the small one like that. And it was sitting up on the edge of the woods where I'd set it over there out of the sun, with pop in it and water. And all of a sudden, Kyle, wham, it comes flying out through there, and it got me right in my side. I mean, I went down like a sack of potatoes. I mean, I hit the ground. That was it. And I'm going, oh, crap, what the heck, And I can see that the big trees moving. And I'm thinking, I can't get up. I'll be totally honest with you. I peed my pants. I ain't gonna lie about it.
Okay.
But all of a sudden, I see this huge figure here. There's another one comes from this side, and he's tan colored, and he was smaller. This one is huge. This one is smaller, and they just boom. They're fighting, and that was my chance that I got up. And I got back to the barn. I keep a shotgun hid in the barn because I got coyotes and I have bobcats coming into my barn and everything.
Wow.
And I reached for it, and then I thought, no, get to the house, because I had to go all the way back down, cross over a bridge, because I moved from back by the woods when Mom and Dad, I had them, they got sick, and I had other people to take care of. I needed to get closer to the road because I live in the country, and for the squad to be able to get to them to load them. So I got a ways. And so I got back in the house, and I could hear it. It went on for a while. And what I think happened was they were putting off those calls. Now we have a big 400-acre tract of timber that had never been touched in 200 years, probably never had enough. And they started logging it out last year.
Oh.
Now, this was a major site where they live. There's cave systems in there. It's part of the old Shawnee burials and different things. And it's called the Valley of the Dead. That's the Shawnee name for it.
Okay.
But that's what we call it. And so they've been moving about with them taking out the timber. They're tearing up their homes. So we've had more interactions and them coming out more. But honestly, I don't think he meant to hit me. He threw the cooler. He was mad. It was like somebody just being mad and you're just ripping. I did it before. I'm sure everybody gets mad about something's happened. You just, you fly off the handle or whatever. And you're not being mad at somebody. You're just taking out your aggressions on whatever's handy. And that's my take on it. I don't think it meant to do me harm. It probably might have if the other one had not interacted. But
okay. You think that might have been a possibility too, that the one was being aggressive towards you and the other may have came and stopped him.
Well, I kind of thought maybe with them doing the calls, they might have thought there was I found the tree. I think I sent you the pictures of the tree structures and stuff.
Yep.
They marked their territories. I found that out with Dad, growing up in the woods. They marked their territories. They use tree structures. They use rocks. I actually have some of Dad's rules was don't touch anything that's, he showed me these stacked up rocks in different ways. He's like, you don't touch them. Don't bother them. You don't interfere with them. Those are markers. Those are markers for them. They're talking to each other saying, this is a safe area. This is where you'll find whatever, that's what those are for, to never bother them. Okay, but if Dad said it, that he wouldn't have told me something to, so I always listen to him, believe me.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, no, and I can't wait to get down there. What's neat about you is, this is kind of our preliminary meeting. I'm going to get kind of schooled up and reminded of everything you got going on down there. And then I'm going to hop in the car here in Michigan and come down, and we're going to film everything you're telling us now. We're going to capture some of that. And we're going to be gentle about it. I'm more of the quiet type, more of the gentle. I don't need to be banging on trees or doing calls or anything like that. It's from your perspective, and it sounds like your clan there, they like being mellow, and they don't like being stirred up. So,
Right.
so that's how we'll approach it when I come down. But yeah, go ahead. Anything else you can think of? Do you have any kind of names for them?
Um, I have the story I was telling you about Dad, and when he got sick and I moved him here, the one that would come and watch him, because like I said, they within just a month of Dad being here, he showed up, and he was huge, and I call him the grandfather. He's very old now. My dad was he passed away when he was 84, and he's been dead for 16 years. So he's around 100 years old, and this had been attached to him since he was a child. So this one's old, and you can see. I see him rarely, but after that, before Dad was gone, I saw him nightly. He would come and stand there behind that big cedar tree in my yard. And the first time I seen him, like I said, I smelled it first, and then it was like on the fourth day when I went down to get Dad. I carry a pistol with me, and I thought it was a bear.
Okay.
So something in my head just wasn't registering. I'll be honest. I had taken care of him. I hadn't left him. I was totally worn out, hadn't slept. And that night I seen the shape behind the tree. So Dad taught me, you see something, you don't run, because if you run, you become prey. So you move slowly away from whatever you're doing. Try not to, so that's what I did. And I got in the door. And he kind of laughed at me. Dad said, "What in the world is wrong with you?" He said, "You crazy?" I said, "Dad, there's a bear out there." I said, "Where's there a bear out there?" I said, "It's behind the tree. It's standing behind the tree." And he said, "Show me." Well, I help him up. He didn't walk very good. I brought him over to the door, and he looked out, and he said, "You leave him alone, and he'll leave you alone. He ain't doing nothing but watching." And it's like a little bell goes off in my head. And I was like, "You don't mean that, you don't mean that." And he's like, "He ain't doing nothing but watching. He won't hurt you."
Wow.
And
Can I ask a question really quick? So, you said attached. Now, I would like some clarification because, and the reason I'm asking about this is because I may have one that's attached to me or interested in me. And his name is Scout, and he's been to my house a couple of times. We figure two, three times, and I've got a picture of him. He did a grunt. And ever since I visited a certain area, I've had more interaction. So could you expand on that about being attached? And this one even being attached to your grandfather and how many years? And yeah, so go ahead.
well, the way Dad explained it to me was, you have to go back. It's an old Shawnee story.
Okay.
And he said, they hand this down from the elders. I can only tell part of it. Anyway, they said the Moon-Eyed people came, and they had children with the Shawnee. They left behind the Watchers to protect those children.
Okay.
So each, for the families of for certain families that interacted, is the way I understood. You get assigned a watcher. That watcher is attached to you. You grow up with it. It's there to watch you and protect you, guide you, and honestly, that served true for Dad, because he came every time. Every night he came. There was no violence. he would just basically stand there and watch. But I would feel, because you feel their energy. You feel that.
Okay.
It's very strong. And there's been times when I've been knocked down flat. I'll be truthful.
Okay.
It's
From
like
the energy.
it's like an electrical type thing. But there was an incident before Dad passed away. Again, I got woke up to screaming, outside. It sounded like an elephant, like growls. I've never heard that kind of screams in my life. I'd seen them before. I heard grunts. I've heard the wood knocks, like the clinking of the rocks. It's almost like a clinking of glass sometimes, different things. No problem. But this night it was violent. It was like these horrible screams. And again, I'm a widow. I lost my husband and youngest son. What's been 31 years ago.
I'm sorry to hear that, Donna.
Well, they went for ice cream and it was a car accident. They got hit.
Oh.
But anyway, but I've always, I grew up with a gun. I grew up going outside by myself. I ran through the woods. If that wasn't an issue with me. So that night, I came out, I was in my nightgown, barefooted. I didn't pick up a gun. I just, these screams, And when I came, I was back against the woods in my old house. And I had brought a hog over. Well, it was a pig when I brought it over from Dad's farm. It was the last one. I just brought it. But she was about 400-pound sow now. This is a big hog. And her pen was at where my bridge is. And those screams, I hear it. Well, I had walked all the way down to there. And I never really figured out whether it was the one that which I didn't think it was the one that would come and stand. I think it was a different one, but I'm not sure. It went through that hog pen. Now this hog is, you can imagine how tall it would be. So the fence for the sides of this hog pen is huge. It stepped over it. And of course, hog got mud, right? I cast those footprints. They were 18 inches long and they are 12 wide. They're huge because it stepped and then over. I mean, that's the stride was that long. It's like step, and then the other side, and then into the creek because I have a creek. Then it crossed the creek. It didn't cross my bridge. It crossed the creek, and on down to the bottom property, I had a chicken coop there. It went through it like it was made of matchsticks. I mean, it burst it. I mean, it just ripped it apart. It just destroyed it. Chickens was everywhere. And Dad had an his old dog, his old name was Old Jake, and he was a bull mass and a pit bull mix. So he's a big dog. Well, I'm still hearing the screams. I decided I'd get back in the house, and I did. I went back, and I had my gun by the door, and I picked it up. It was like something physically stopped me from going out that door. It was like, of course, I ain't gonna say I wasn't scared. I was. That you can imagine. But I heard the dog scream. And your first instinct is, you're going to try to do whatever. And but I couldn't. It was like something physically stopped me. I could not move. I could not make myself go.
Okay.
But it went on down, and once you get out and you go down the road, at the end of the road, there was an older lady lived there. She had little dogs. She was elderly. And she called the cops because she hears the screaming is passing her house, and it got her dog. It traveled on up the road. My daughter is about 6 miles from me, and you go back a holler. She's at the very end of that holler, back into those woods I was telling you about. And that's where it went. That's where it went. But all the way up through there, it just ripped and tore, mostly dogs. It hurt. But it took me a couple days, and I finally found Dad's dog. He was alive, amazingly. I don't know how he could be alive because it bit through the hindquarters. It was like it literally picked it up, like crunched it through the hindquarters. And the teeth marks were massive. I mean, massive. If he hadn't, to this day, I'm still amazed. He lived, and Dad told me what to do. I took care of him. He never moved around really after that because it bit through his back, his backbone and through his privates in that area. It just like you would have these massive jaws this big and just bite through. And
Wow.
and honestly, I don't know, but I wasn't the only one that heard that night. The lady down there, the cops came out, and he told me, I was like, "Oh, you're hearing coyotes." I was like, "Okay." I lived in the woods my whole life. It was not a coyote, but I didn't.
Right.
I didn't
Right.
argue. I didn't argue with him because, first off, I thought if it is the one that's attached to Dad, something happened, and I don't. You have a kind of a sense of loyalty,
Oh, sure.
So, but other people, and then there was a lady. She lived on down in Blue Creek, and I was in the store. It was a gun store, and I heard her talking about something had ripped through her dog kennel. She had German Shepherds, and she said the dogs burst through the house, but it ripped their kennel completely apart. And she's like, I don't know what it was. I don't understand what kind of animal was it. A bear, and I never elaborated. I just talked to her. It was the same night that it happened here, and it happened there. So, but the funny part of it was the next night, Dad's was back, calm as could be. There was no whatever happened. Whether they were fighting, whether there was Dad's was there and this other one, whatever happened, I still to this day don't know. But
Yeah, I wonder, that makes me think too if it was maybe another alpha male that had come into the territory and they mixed it up for a bit and your dad's chased it off. Did your dad ever have a name for him?
he just called him the old one. That was
Okay,
his.
the old one.
I call him grandfather. He calls him the old one. I called him the old grandfather. And
Okay. Do you have a watcher that's attached to you?
yes, I do. I do.
Awesome. What's his name?
I've never actually even gave him a name. He's just always been there. I think
Okay.
it's the one that stole my ribbons when I was a girl.
Okay.
The same one. I've gotten last summer. I got some. I took some prints out of the creek. Actually, casted them. I think I might have sent a picture of them to you. There's two.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's not him. These are different. Like I said, I think they're moving out more because of them. They're logging here so bad. They're taking down forests, and not just that. There's the bobcats. I have bobcats coming into the barn. I have chickens and ducks and geese and guineas, and I have all that.
Okay.
And the bobcats are coming in, and they're not afraid. I mean, normally, they'll run away. But I came into the barn, it's been probably 2 or 3 months ago, and there's one in the barn, and it was a big male. He didn't run. He was going to stand. He's standing me a fight. Of course, they're protected, so you're not allowed to kill them. But I keep a gun in the barn, and by George, I ain't going to let you jump on me.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, if I care, and that's it, I'm never going to take a pot shot at a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. I may lean towards the watcher name now. Yeah, I'm not interested in that. No, I'm more concerned. We have more and more cougar here in Michigan, and they're big and they're quiet.
Right.
And then we do have the occasional black bear here in the thumb of Michigan as well. So you do have to be careful. Here, the Sasquatch, they mainly move off. If you're in their territory, we've got a more rambunctious clan here that might chase you off, depending on what you're doing, especially if you're hunting in their area. They're going to chase you off, but yeah, that's awesome. And you're not sure your watcher. I can't remember if you said you have a name for him, and you're not sure if it's a male or a female.
Uh, it's a male. Mine is a male.
Okay.
How I know that is because I see him, and
Okay.
you can tell. I mean, I don't get close and inspect, but you can tell.
Right. Right.
But,
What color is he?
yeah, actually, it's tan colored. There's a
Okay.
white. It's cream colored. Um, so there's an old one that he's white. He looks. Now I got to tell you, there's two white ones here, and there's one. It's down on Churn Creek, and he's violent. They've had some really violent episodes with him. Um,
Okay.
Mine is a different color. Of course, we have the red, the brownish red looking. The
So you've got
darker
all colors. Yeah. Yeah.
different colors. I found out over the years, which Dad had told me, he's like, if you work hard at it, you can actually communicate. You do it mentally.
Yeah.
You feel what there's, you feel there's, you can sense them, their thoughts. And I can feel if they're getting their agitation. That also happened last summer with the Night Stalker group. Mike Miller actually saw
Okay.
one for the, up close and personal for the first time. And it was kind of changed him. But he wasn't the only one that night. I was with a group, and so they got to experience the whole clan. There was 8 there. And
Okay.
so I have some control over. I can feel their agitation, but they can feel mine too. And if they sense I'm in some kind of a danger or something, they do it. They are protective. They are. But then I
Okay.
got that. I have that same sense of protection for them, and I can feel it. The more agitated they get, the more agitated I get, the more agitated they get, and I can feel them. And you can feel them. I can feel them. I feel it's a mental thing. It's not. I don't
Sure.
really. I do have. I have the Shawnee language, the ancient Shawnee language. It's not the modern. This is the ancient.
Awesome.
They respond to that language. Dad had told me a story about his mother when he was little. He must have been 3 or 4. And of course, like I said, he's born in 1927, back in the woods under buzzard roost in an old cabin. And the cabin actually burned, and they had the log barn, and they turned that into a house. I actually have
Okay.
pictures. Dad sitting on the front porch, and my grandma and grandpa standing in the doorway of that old cabin. And he said, of course, there's no running water. There's no bathrooms. This is, you're out in the woods. And he said he was little and he'd go bathroom. So his mom had taken him outside to the bathroom. Her name was Annie, and she's Shawnee. So he had went over to like the edge of what they call the yard or whatever, because basically in the woods. There's, this is a cabin in the woods. And he said he sat down to go to the bathroom, and all of a sudden this big dark figure came up over top of him. He's seen the shadow come up over top of him. Of course, he's little, and that was the first time he saw one. He said his mom walked over to where he was and just reached down, picked him up into her arms, and said she put her hand out, and she said, "No, baby, my baby." And he said, she carried him back in the house, and it went back up through the woods. So, which that tells me well, there's other stories about her, and he told me another one, but she interacted and she had, they had a relationship, type thing going on there, because you wouldn't just walk up to a wild thing and say no and walk away.
Right, right.
But he had also told me my grandma liked, of course, she's Shawnee, so, and I still do it. It's like the dandelion greens, the green, not the flower, but the petal, the leaves. Those are like lettuce. You take that dandelion, that makes it like lettuce, and the wild onions. You chop all that up, and then they use Joe bacon. They render that up with the grease, and chop that meat up, and then they pour that over top of that, and it makes like a salad.
Okay.
My grandma loved green onions and dandelions, so there's a green onion patch, and she would go there. And Dad said he was little too. They went there to collect the green onions, and he said, this big patch, I guess, the watcher liked green onions too, because my grandma was on one side picking the onion or pulling the onions, and it was on the other side. So
Fantastic.
they collected together. There was nothing, but this is the woods. They literally, my grandpa, he trapped and hunted. My dad is the youngest of 17 kids. They both married twice. So that's a lot of kids to feed.
Yeah.
He and then later in life, my dad was the last kid. But my grandpa going through the fence, and he had a muzzle loader. And somebody had double loaded it. They doubled.
Wow.
When he went through, he'd put it down, and when he leaned over, it went off. He shot his arm off. Literally.
Oh, no.
It was hanging by, the way they tell the stories, it's hanging by like a thread. And again, it was by buzzard roost. He came down out, and which he's about to bleed to death. And there's a fork. This is a terrible story. I mean, but they said there's like a tree there had and he threw that up in there, and he just ripped it the rest of the way off. And then he took his shirt and he bound it, but then that's where he went down at. And thank God they were in a horse and wagon, and they came through and found him, and that's what saved his life. He.
Oh my goodness.
I think Dad said that he took. Of course, the muzzle loader. I actually have the horn, that they carried the powder in. It's like a cow horn, and he said he dumped that powder to stop the flow of blood and packed it with moss. But of course he's bleeding out. So, but that he did that before he did it quickly. And I guess that's what saved his life, because he got that in there, and the shirt around it is kind of like a compression bandage. And just thank God somebody came along, not too long, and they got him. So.
Oh, for sure. Well, going back real quick, just so you know, I've had my interaction. So when I come down, you'll kind of understand a little bit more where I'm at. When I felt I was having interaction with a watcher, I asked, okay, what's your name? And the reply I got, the mind speak I got was, my name is Scout. Thanks for friendship.
Yeah.
So that was the interaction, and there might have been one more after that. I wasn't sure, but that was a definite. I had asked the question, and then it wasn't much longer later. I was taking the garbage. You got to kind of walk back to the cans, weighing back here, taking the garbage out from the house, way to the back of the cans, and when I'm just walking out, I heard that voice, that mind speak. And I spun around because I thought there was somebody there. I've got the garbage over my shoulder, and I spun around. I didn't see anybody. And, that brings in the question, okay, was he cloaking? Was he standing not too far off? So I've had my interaction.
I call it the shimmer, because
Okay.
they can be standing right in sight, and you won't see them. They were literally, they can turn. It's like their fur or whatever cloaks them.
Okay.
I think if you're supposed to see him, you will, and if you're not, you won't. He could be standing right. Well, like the first time I saw him, I had sat there in that yellow root patch with my dad digging. I saw nothing until I stood up, and it literally was within 30 feet of where I was sitting. You know, it's that it wasn't hidden. I just never saw it, you know, until I think that was my introduction. I was supposed to see it that day. That was my, I mean, maybe Dad even planned it that way. I don't know, because he had his own way of teaching you stuff. The good thing about the last 2 years of Dad's life, I never left him. Not for a minute. I stayed with him. I took care of him. As long as I stayed close to him, he stayed calm, and that's what I wanted. I'd had him in the Christ Hospital, and we'd been there for 30 days, and they told me he might live another week. I said, we're going to go home then. We came home. My dad lived 2 more years.
Okay.
So he told me when I came in, he's like, going back down on the farm, get me some cherry bark and some different roots and herbs, because I use a lot of natural stuff. And he said, bring it home. I made he said, mush it up. You know, I made a paste out of it. He said, and I'll wrap my ribs. If he wanted
Fantastic.
it did not matter what. If he told me, if my dad told me to go, I knew, you know, my dad never gave me a spanking in my life. Not that I did not deserve it. My grandma would beat the hide off of me with a switch, but I deserved it. She wasn't a mean woman. She was sweet as could be. But boy, I tell you, I know I put her to the end. But Dad didn't. Dad told me. He'd tell me why not to do it. And I respected what he said, you know. It wasn't I didn't respect Grandma. I did. I was just wild. I just like running through the woods. She would be chasing me, trying to comb my hair. She had this little fine comb, and I had real thick black. You know, my hair was long and black, and it was so thick, and it just ripped your head.
Yeah. I remember my dad grabbing me by the face whenever he wanted to comb my hair, and just, you know, right through the tangles.
Oh, yep. She'd do that where she'd wrap her legs around me, you know, and just like, oh my God, you're killing me.
That's too funny. Hey, one of the questions I have down here, because you're one of the more knowledgeable, do you think with the Sasquatch clans, like we've got a group not too far from me. I live in what I call the Bigfoot Triangle, smack dab in the middle of a triangle. I have Bigfoot to the east of me, documented reports to the west of me, to the north of me, and the south. But it is shaped like a triangle, how it works. And the two sides are two rivers, the Cass River and the Black River. And if you listen to my show, I talk about it all the time. But I did notice one of the clans, they're mainly all black in color. Now, do the same clans have the same color, or it doesn't matter? You know, do you know if there's a mix at all? Would maybe one particular clan be black and brown, or maybe even a white one?
Well, the one that interacts with me more is a mixture. The old one is, but I don't know. Maybe he's white because he's so old.
Oh, good point.
Because thinking about the age-wise, my dad would have been 100 years old. Now, this this was part of his interactions. He was attached to Dad, so he would be, you know, somewhere around that age. And so basically, you know, our hair turns white. So I think maybe that's, you know, maybe he wasn't always white. Maybe he was the one. When I saw it, when I was, like I said, I'm 62. I'll soon be 63 in 3 days. So
happy birthday.
I was 6. So that's a lot of years ago. And with Dad, so maybe he was dark. Maybe that's, you know. And then as he got older, Dad got older. He got older. He looked dark to me when he was here. But like I said, Dad's been gone for 16 years.
Wow.
And he was a big guy. You know, he was behind that tree, he's well over 8 foot tall, every bit over that. And if that was his footprints, my house, actually, my brother, I take care of him, and his cabin caught on fire about 3 years ago, and it spread back to my big house because I put the little house in down here. I used the Amish high barns because I had to do something quickly for everybody being sick. And so I put the houses in down here, and my big house had all my stuff in. I removed anything because I'd go back there, and I had all my casts and stuff in my bedroom, and they burned in the house along with, gosh, I could not tell you. I am the collector. I am the keeper of I had 200-year-old handmade quilts, handed down from generation.
Oh my goodness.
China, the pictures, stuff that cannot be replaced. Every time I look for something, I think about where it was at. My heart breaks. It does. It just breaks.
I bet.
Those few pictures that I have I actually have 2 letters. I got them put away safely. They're from 1797 from my grandparents. When my grandpa came here, he was Irish, and he had 2 sons already. He had been married. His wife passed away, and he married the first Shawnee woman here. Her name was Lame Wolf. I have not that generation, but anyway, when the soldiers came in, they move out to Shawnee. They sent them to Canada. They sent them to Florida. They took them away. So they had written these letters, basically like a will to hand, because they had, which would have been my great 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 grandfather. All of them's name was William Henry. So it's William Henry, William Henry, William Henry, and my grandpa was William Henry. And I even have a brother that's William, but his is William Anders to William Henry. My uncle was married and had kids of his own when Dad was born, but he thought the world of Dad, so they were very close. And he had 3 big farms, and Dad would do his farming for him. And wherever Dad went, I worked tobacco, I worked hay, I worked the cattle, I did all that. And I would go with him. Well, Uncle George, he got a big kick out of it. He's like, I was Dad's shadow. There's a story about that too. But he had told me, he's like, when I don't want this anymore, I'm going to give this to you. We have this big trunk. And I said, he always teased me and he played tricks. And I said, you probably got a big old snake in there, And he said, no, they're for you. Those letters was down in this, he had preserved them. He had them preserved. And they were down in the lining of that trunk. And that's where I found them. But
wow.
He was, my dad didn't drink or do anything. He was very different. Uncle George liked to drink. He had longhorn cattle, the great big, the longhorns. And he had this bull. Oh my God, this bull was mean. And he was in the barn and he'd had a little too much to drink. He kept a bottle hid in the barn. He fell over in the manger and that bull had him down. He had his head on his chest. Well, Dad carried a sawed-off shotgun because that bull was mean. He put me up in the hay mound. He said, now you sit there and don't you move. Well, he laid that shotgun down there beside of me. He had a pitchfork and he had an axe handle, and he was trying to beat that bull off of my grandpa, or not off of my uncle. And it wasn't going nowhere. And they kind of danced around and hit Dad, and it knocked Dad over. And when it did, I picked that shotgun up and I shot the bull.
Wow.
I didn't kill the bull, but it made it back off. Well, Daddy gets Uncle George up out of that manger, pulls him over there, kicked him in the hind end, said, get yourself to the house, you dang burn fool. Get the heck out of here. And then he just stopped. He turned around, he looked up, and he went, Duke, what did you do? I said, oh, bull, go kill you, Daddy. He said, don't you move. He said, don't you touch that gun again. From that day, Uncle George called me Shotgun Annie. That was it. And every day I got ice cream money when we left. I think it was his way of saying, thank you for saving me.
Oh, for sure, without a doubt. I'd be thanking you big time.
Oh
Hey,
my
real
God.
quick, let's address one more Bigfoot question before we wrap it up. Something that kind of rang my bell a little bit. This your dad's watcher that
Mhm,
was attached to him.
mhm.
Their lifespan has got to be longer than ours because if he's around during probably most of your dad's life and then after, so we had a theory here. I had heard some and seen some documentation here in Michigan, and there was a thought from the Chippewa Indians here in Michigan that they may live up to 300 or maybe even 500 years of age. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know this one would well be over 100 years old. And
Okay.
I've seen young ones. I've seen babies. Um, Now, that's the one thing I will say. When there is young ones, they are very protective, and it doesn't matter who you are. I mean, they will tolerate me, but I don't do anything. I mean, if I feel the aggression, I'll sink to the ground and I put my head down. I do.
Oh, sure.
I'm totally submissive. I don't, because it's like me and protecting my child. I'll do whatever I have to do to protect my own child. Any parent will do that, or any good parent will do that. You'll give your life for your child, and they are very, very sensitive about the children. But then the
Okay.
kids, what I found out is the young ones, they like to play tricks. I've had them get up in the tree, throw acorns and little pebbles, nothing violent, but
Right.
it's a kid playing tricks and just having a good time. And again, that was part of last summer. They kind of did a few little tricks like that. Um, with the Night Stalkers, they've had huge rocks thrown at them.
Oh,
They've had some good, and Mike has a lot of good recordings of the callbacks. Like I said, I find out that I do better. I have the flute music, and I put out, I make my cakes and I do that kind of thing. And I've went back, I have a cot, and I just go back there, and I like the quiet. I'll go to the woods. I have a camp. I'm setting it back up because I'd gotten sick and I just kind of let it go down. But I just like going back there and setting, and it's peaceful to me. It's just like being with a family member, and it's kind of interesting, and to feel their feelings, and just, well, like I said, there's a lot of the old Shawnee stories that goes with it. I've written some of them, and I got permission. I had to ask permission from my elders before I could ever do this, before I could ever
oh,
speak.
fantastic. I would want that. And like when I come down, and it might even just be me with a couple of my cameras and tripods. And actually, I have requests of that, so I do come by myself, or my girlfriend might come, or maybe a couple other people. But I might come down now that we've had this conversation, and I'm getting to know your situation more. I might be coming down myself, and we'll keep it very peaceful. Yeah, no crazy stuff. I don't need to yell. I don't need to throw rocks. I don't need to beat on trees or anything like that. It's the relationship to me that matters, and how it's been structured and peaceful between your whole family, and maybe generationally down to you. And so we want to respect that. I do. I want to respect that. So when I come down, we're looking at May 17th. And we might switch that. Think about this. I might be able to come down May 26th, that Friday,
Okay.
before. You let me know what's best for you. But is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this up? Because we get to all your pictures, I'm going to include in your TV pilot series episode. And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, honestly, the reason I'm doing this, because we've been told, we keep everything pretty private and quiet. But with all of the logging and the woods coming down, they are coming out. And my thing is to protect them. I mean, even here, you got the non-believers. They laugh at you. They make fun of you. They do it all the time. I just had, I have a cousin that just made and it's like, I don't mind. It doesn't bother me because I know what I know. And my wish is to protect them because they're going to interact more with people and there's going to be more violence. And if they're going to interact, I mean, you could come out with a shotgun. Okay. You shoot one of them, it ain't going to hurt them, but they're going to hurt you. And that's going to cause a
for
lot
sure.
And so that was when I spoke with the elders, and which they are very private. They interact with me, but whether they'd talk to you, I don't know that because they are very, very private. And that was the one thing I said, we need to, they're part of us. They've been part of us from the very beginning. Where did they come from? I don't know. I mean, they say the moon-eyed people. I actually have some artifacts of heads. It's carved heads, which I think I sent one to you, but I'll show you, when you come,
Okay.
I'll bring my cases out and show you.
Fantastic.
They said when they came here, they, had children with the Shawnee people. And then the Watchers, they didn't breed with the Shawnee people. These Watchers are the moon-eyed people's protectors. They left them to protect the children, their children. And there's also another theory about the blood type. I'll explain to that privately. I'm not going to do that for people to hear, but I'll do that privately with you. And honestly, it kind of comes true. Once I explain it to you, you'll see. But that's my goal. My goal is I don't want to be famous. I'm not looking. I'm a dowser, and one of my rules is I don't just dowse for the water wells. I dowse ley lines. I do spirits. I've had interactions. I see things, should I say. But so did my grandmother. My grandmother is what they call born to the veil. It's passed down. I have different things, but it's not something I talk about. And being a dowser, there's a lot of rules. You do not charge for that. Now you can take a gift, or that kind of thing, but it kind of all goes together. It's maybe it's just old mountain superstition because there's a lot of that, but a lot of it is true.
No, I love the heritage. I love the story of it all. Everyone has their own story to tell, their own heritage, and that's what's really cool about your story is just the generational relationships that you've had with your tribes folk and also the Watchers. So. All right, Donna. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this episode. This is episode 13. I'm going to go ahead and put you into the green room and then wrap it up. And if you could stay in the green room and we'll talk for a little while afterwards, we have to upload your portion and make sure that's settled first before we say goodbye. So, hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. We're going to let Donna go to the green room right now. And as I said, thanks for watching another episode of the Bigfoots of America podcast. I am so excited to get down to southeastern Ohio, learn more about the connection between Donna Copas and her Watcher friends, and just how that heritage was passed through the generations down through her father to Donna. To me, that's what it's all about. It's all about the storytelling, the meaning behind it, and the relationships. These beings aren't just animals in the woods. And I'm hoping there's a big story that I can learn and share with all of you. If you need to get a hold of me, you can go to bigfootsofmichigan.com. You can connect with me through the website there. That connects to all of our social media media platforms. If you could, please go to our YouTube channel to like and subscribe. That is, when you go to YouTube, put in Bigfoots of America or Bigfoots of Michigan channel, and we should come up, and then like and subscribe that. And then you can also reach us if you want to be a guest on our show. You can go to Bigfoots of America. Make sure you get that S in there. Bigfoots of America at gmail.com. So as always, thanks for tuning in, and stick around for more, because we got a lot more episodes to come. So take care, everybody, and we will see you next time.